Hey everyone, I hope you're doing great. Today's video is going to open your eyes to something that's shaking up the entire conversation around America's economy. President Trump's plan to send out $2,000 stimulus checks. Whether this turns into real relief or just sharp political timing. You're about to hear the full story in the simplest and most factual way possible. And before we get started, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps this community grow and keeps you updated with every big move happening in finance and economics. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate your support. Now, let's get into it. Imagine waking up to the news that $2,000 might soon be landing in your bank account, not as a loan, not as a refund, but as a tariff dividend payment directly approved by President Donald Trump. It sounds like the kind of announcement that can change the national conversation overnight. But behind the headlines lies a complex mix of politics, numbers, key, and legal hurdles that could decide whether these payments actually reach the American people or remain just another campaign promise. Today, we're breaking it all down in simple, human language. What's real? What's still up in the air? And what this could mean for you and the economy before the 2026 midterms. So here's what's happening. President Trump has publicly stated that he wants to send out $2,000 checks to low and middle-income Americans. The money, according to him, would come from the massive revenue the government has collected through tariffs on imported goods. What's left after these payouts, he says, would go toward reducing the national debt, something he's called a national security priority. The idea sounds simple enough. America earns hundreds of billions from tariffs, INs. Part of that money goes back to the people who have been paying more for products because of those same tariffs. But as with any government proposal, the devil is in the details, and those details are exactly what we'll unpack here. Let's start with the political backdrop. New polling from Emerson College paints a clear picture of the pressure the former president is under. His approval rating sits at about 41%, 49% disapproving, a drop of 4 points since October. Among Republicans, support has slipped from 91 to 79%, while independent disapproval has climbed to 51%. Even among Hispanic voters, disapproval has jumped to 54%. On the generic congressional ballot for 2026, Democrats hold a narrow 4-point lead. And when voters were asked what issues matter most to them, economy, 65% said the economy, 61% pointed to threats to democracy, 59% mentioned immigration, and 57% said housing affordability. Clearly, the economy dominates everything, and for any politician, that means one thing: visible, immediate action that helps people feel relief in their daily lives. That's where these proposed $2,000 checks come in. Trump is framing them as a tariff dividend, a kind of patriotic refund funded by money already collected from tariffs. It's designed to make the economic message simple. Americans paid higher prices because of tariffs, so now they get a cut of the revenue those tariffs generated. Supporters argue it's a creative way to give back without borrowing more money. Critics say it's just another round of stimulus with a new label. The plan would reportedly prioritize middle and lower income households, while using leftover funds to pay down the national debt. Now, what makes this proposal especially interesting is how it blurs the line between a tax cut and a cash payment. Treasury officials have floated the idea that instead of mailing checks, the administration could implement tax changes like eliminating taxes on tips, overtime pay, and Social Security income, or making auto loan interest deductible. But Trump's team seems to recognize that there's a huge difference between a tax code change you barely notice and an actual payment that hits your bank account. One feels like politics. The other feels personal. Let's talk numbers, because that's where things get complicated. According to the Treasury Department, the United States collected roughly $195 to $200 billion in customs duties during fiscal year 2025. That's a big jump compared to previous years. But according to the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, these payments are structured like the pandemic-era stimulus checks. The total cost could hit $600 billion. That leaves a shortfall of about $400 billion, meaning the government would be paying out much more than it actually collected in tariffs. So unless the payments are smaller, more targeted, or funded partly from elsewhere, the math simply doesn't balance. The idea of a tariff-funded stimulus sounds nice, but by those figures, it would still require additional borrowing or budget reshuffling to make it happen. There's also the big question of eligibility. Who exactly would get these payments? Trump has said all Americans except high-income earners, but he hasn't defined what high income means. If it mirrors the COVID-19 checks, that cutoff might be around $75,000 for individuals and $150,000 for married couples. Then there's the issue of dependents. If each dependent counts, a family of 4 could receive $8,000 in total. If it's per household, it would be $2,000 total. That's a massive difference in cost and in impact. And while direct deposits would be the fastest method, the exact mechanism still depends on whether this plan becomes law and how Congress chooses to structure it. Now, what would this mean for the broader economy? Economists have mixed views. Some say this could provide much-needed relief, helping families pay off debt, cover rent, and keep spending flowing through local economies. Others warn that repeating pandemic-style cash infusions could worsen inflation just as the economy is trying to cool off. Research from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis found that pandemic stimulus spending added roughly 2.6 percentage points to overall inflation. With inflation already a political sore spot, pumping another few $100 billion into the economy could risk undoing progress made in the past year. In other words, what feels good in the short term might cost more in the long run. The legal picture isn't straightforward either. The Supreme Court recently questioned the scope of presidential power to impose certain tariffs without congressional approval. That means if the current tariff structure is ruled unconstitutional or needs rewriting, it could delay or even block this plan altogether. Some close to Trump have suggested the administration is already preparing backup strategies to rewrite the tariffs under different legal frameworks, just in case. But even if the legal side is cleared, Congress would still need to pass a bill defining who gets the money, how much they get, and where the funding comes from. Senator Josh Hawley's American Workers Rebate Act of 2025 already proposes something similar, using tariff revenue to fund rebate checks. But it's still sitting in the Senate Finance Committee with no clear path forward. So what could happen next? There are several scenarios. One possibility is that the plan gets narrowed, smaller checks, stricter income caps, or limited to households rather than individuals. Another is that it shifts away from physical payments entirely and becomes a series of tax breaks disguised as stimulus. A third option is that the legal ruling forces a full rewrite of tariff authority, delaying the plan beyond 2025. And the fourth, though unlikely, is that all the revenue goes straight to paying down the national debt, something fiscal conservatives have been demanding for years. Each path carries different political and economic consequences, and each one tells a story about where America's priorities really lie: immediate relief versus long-term stability. For everyday Americans, the main things to watch now are clear. First, keep an eye on the Supreme Court's decision on tariff authority. That ruling will determine whether this proposal even has a legal foundation. Second, pay attention to any draft bills or public statements defining income limits or dependent rules that will reveal who actually benefits. Third, monitor updated cost estimates from neutral budget offices. If the numbers start to balloon beyond what tariffs can cover, expect debate to intensify. And finally, watch inflation trends. If prices begin rising again, this plan could face political backlash before it even leaves the Senate floor. At the end of the day, Trump's proposed $2,000 tariff dividend checks sit at the intersection of politics, economics, and timing. It's a bold idea that connects directly with people's everyday struggles. But it raises tough questions about fiscal responsibility, inflation risk, and feasibility. Will it become a real policy or remain a headline? That depends on the next few months and on how the courts, Congress, and the economy itself respond. For now, all we can do is follow the facts and see how they unfold. So what do you think? Should the government issue another round of checks, target only the lowest income groups, or use that money to reduce national debt instead? Share your thoughts below. Your opinion matters more than ever in shaping this debate. If this breakdown helped you understand the full picture behind the numbers and the headlines, make sure to hit the like button. Subscribe for clear and fact-based updates, and I'll see you in the next one.
You